Welcome to another episode of the Empathetic Atheist. My name is Justin. Thank you guys for hanging out with us tonight. Very excited for tonight's episode. Normally when I have bigger names on the channel, it's our atheist community. It's our Matt Dillahunty, Aaron Ross, Seth Andrews. We actually have a theist that's actually made a pretty good name for himself, and I'm very excited to have a conversation with him. Hopefully he doesn't beat me up too much tonight. But with that being said, let me go ahead and introduce. I got Bryce co-hosted with me tonight, and we have Mr. Eric Hernandez. How are you guys doing?
Great,
good.
As always.
Good. Thank you for having me. Appreciate the kind words.
Yeah. Typically, I see a lot of bias on both sides when it comes to what do you think there's ever been, Justin, do you think there's ever been a Christian that has ever beaten an atheist in a debate? And most of the time, we're like, no, their God doesn't exist. Like they couldn't ever win. But no, I've seen multiple different debates to where I'm like, you know what? Argumentatively, the theist had the upper hand, and I'm honest enough to be able to say that. And I think I've met people on the other side on the theist has been like, yeah, that with my debates, I've had a couple different debates, and there have been Christians that were like, yeah. You had it like 5 minutes in already, and the other person, they didn't even know what they were talking about. So I think that we can be honest enough to know that there are times, regardless of the topic of the debate, that both sides have had their ups and downs.
Yeah. Are you saying I've been on the end of beating the atheists, as you say? Is that what you're implying?
Like I said, the one that I watched today, with you and Matt Dillahunty over Does a Soul Exist? I don't believe in a soul, and I can't say that your arguments were super convincing, but argumentatively, they made sense. I mean, I get where you're coming from. I can step into your realm and I can see how he gets there. So yeah, I respect you on that point, definitely.
Yeah, I appreciate that. Loving the show already. Thank you.
I didn't say I agreed with him. No, I actually watched that debate as well today, and it took me a while to recognize that I think I had seen that debate before, because it's about 4 or 5 years old now, isn't it?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So I saw that back in the day, and it's funny because watching something 4 or 5 years ago, from my perspective, is a completely different experience from watching it now, because I was a Christian believer 4 or 5 years ago, and now I'm an atheist. And so I may have taken away different things from watching it, but I'd forgotten about it until I reassessed it today. But it was a good debate.
Right on. Well, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
So before we get too deep into this conversation, let me just go ahead and say hi to, I can't really see exactly whoever's watching on Facebook right now. We have started streaming live to my personal page and the Empathetic Atheist discussion group, and on YouTube. If this is your first time here, please consider hitting the like and subscribe button for more content, so we can keep pushing some more stuff out for you to watch. And we do have after parties after every single main show. So if you'd like to come on and speak to the guest, if they're willing to stay on a little bit longer, you can speak with the guest and have a conversation. As long as it stays respectful and fruitful, I have no problem sending people links. So for Eric, for those of us who do not know who you are, could you give like a brief overview of what your position is? Plug your channel, plug your content, things like that. Let us know a little bit about you.
Yeah. Like I said, my name's Eric Hernandez. I am the apologetics lead for the Baptist General Convention of Texas. That encompasses everything from doing things like this, especially during the pandemic, online training events with churches or groups of people, or speaking with fine atheists like yourself and having these kind of discussions, from also putting together 3 annual, what we call the unapologetic evangelism conferences. And that's what I've been able to do full time for about 2 years now. And then channel just youtube.com/Eric Hernandez.
Cool. So you are a Christian. Would you consider yourself a Calvinist?
No, I was not predestined to be one.
Oh, okay. All right. I was talking to some people today who
I see what you did there.
He's they said he's like super hardcore on the predestination. I was like, I've never heard him say that, but I'll ask him when he gets on the show.
Yeah, hope sometimes people, I guess, because sometimes people confuse me with someone named Sonny Hernandez, and I guess because we're both brown and have the last name Hernandez, people think we're the same person. But Sonny is a pretty hardcore Calvinist, so much so that it doesn't matter. Yeah, no, but I'm not a Calvinist. Now, I do believe in predestination, just not the way the Calvinist would put it. I'm what you call a Molinist.
Okay. Could you for those of us who in the chat that do not know what that means, could you define that for us?
Yeah, so Molinism in a nutshell is basically the view that God, logically prior to creation, before he created anything, he not only knew what the possibilities of what he could create, but also knew, the possibilities he could create, but also knew the different possibilities within worlds of free creatures that he could have created. So, for example, if you're a Christian listening and you believe that God could have created you with one more brother, one more sister, or even 3 more hairs on your head, then by definition, that would be what we call a different world. We don't mean that it's literally a world that exists, but a different scenario or set of circumstances that's not this one. So these would be different possibilities that God could have created. And on the basis of this knowledge that God had, not only knowing what he could create, but also what would happen if he creates certain circumstances and people decided to create this actual world. So we call this the actual world. And there's a lot of great application, in my opinion, for this. But one thing that it's most known for is that it allows for the possibility of human freedom, and yet God still being in control, and not even say sovereign, even though that's used differently than what the Calvinists use it. But he's able to provide. There's provisionism, and there's still free will, and God ordaining all these things.
Do you ever debate Calvinists or people from a different Christian background than yourself on some of these issues?
Yeah.
Or do you only debate? You do.
Yeah. You cut out a little bit,
Okay.
but yeah, I got the sentiment of the question. Yeah. Not too long ago, I debated Derek Morrell, and we become friends on the question of free will. This Saturday, Leighton Flowers and I will be on another Christian show, and they're both Calvinist. I think sometime in January, I'll be debating a Christian on 2 debates. He's a friend of mine, Chris Date, on the topic of free will. He's a Calvinist. And then on the question of the soul, he's a Christian physicalist. So yeah, definitely. I do enjoy in-house debates and discussions. If it's something like in person, for the most part, I'd rather do a debate with a non-believer than having in-house discussions. But I don't mind having in-house discussions. I think on some issues, it's definitely important to have them.
What do you think the goal is, or the intent is behind those debates? What are you hoping to get out of it, or what are you hoping the other person or the audience might be getting out of it?
Yeah, you mean whenever I have these discussions with believers?
Yes.
Yeah. So first and foremost, I think truth matters, right? And if something's true, then irrelevant to how I feel about it, it doesn't matter how I feel or what I think about it. If something's true, then there's in some sense nothing I can do about it, which is part of the reason, and we can get into that shortly, I'm sure. Part of the reason why I'm not an atheist, because I think there are certain things that are true that would have implications, and that would show that I would argue that atheism wouldn't be true. But with respect to something like free will, the argument I use for free will would apply to any view that holds to a deterministic perspective, and that would include Calvinists and even someone like Justin, who I heard earlier today watching the show, is a hard determinist. And basically, if you take away something like free will, then you're not going to have rational responsibility. You're not going to have intellectual integrity or moral responsibility. And I can unpack that whenever you guys want. But the point being is that when you take these implications, that if there were no free will, then, for example, if Justin, you're an atheist, then if you're going to deny free will, I would say then you can't claim that your beliefs, whatever they are regarding atheism, are something that you came to on a rational basis, but instead was something you were causally determined to do and could not have done otherwise.
Yes, I've been pondering this because I've accepted this. I've even told people, yes, I don't hold rational thoughts. I actually just had, I'm pretty sure you've probably heard of him before. I had a conversation with Darth Dawkins a couple weeks ago, and spoke with him, and basically was like, yeah, I don't hold rational beliefs. I'm just convinced that I'm not convinced that a God, so I'm convinced that I don't believe in a God. But I've kind of been looking into it, and I'm almost going like a T-jump route. If you've ever heard T-jump's argument, to basically you start with I think, therefore I am, and there's no argument needed to where you can basically say I have experiences, therefore I exist. I exist. What I'm experiencing is reality, and observation inside of reality can give us rationality. So basically, anything that applies to the laws of logic, I can be rational about. Therefore, I can hold rational thoughts without I guess you would say, an ultimate foundation, which you would call God. Yeah, so maybe this would be a good time to get into one of the first things I wanted to talk about, which is the evolutionary argument against naturalism / argument from reason. Sure. And one of the things I would say that the route that you would take when at work is for a few reasons. Well, first and foremost, because everything that you said was something you were causally determined to believe, and it's not something you came to on the basis of rationality. And so there's no way to justify whether or not what you believe is true. So let me kind of start from the beginning, if that's all right. Is that all right with you? So if there is no God, then you look at how we came into existence and whether or not evolution is true. Because there are theistic evolutionists, but let's just say if there's no God, then the only game in town to explain how we came to be would be Darwinian evolution through natural selection. And the problem, you look at something like epistemology, the study of knowledge and beliefs. In order to have something like knowledge, you would need at least 3 ingredients. If you think of knowledge like baking a cake, you need at least three ingredients. And if you don't have one of these ingredients, you're not going to have the knowledge cake, if you will. And those 3 would be a justified true belief or warranted true belief. So you have to believe the thing that you're claiming to know, and it has to be true. And most importantly, it also has to have a rational justification. But if somehow you cannot have a rational justification, it cannot rise to the level of knowledge. And if you don't have any justification, you cannot be rational and justified in that belief that you have. So here's an example of something like this, and it'll take me a minute or two to unpack this. So say, for example, I wake up one day from taking a nap, and I feel that it's really hot in the house. And I look at the microwave and I see that it's blinking 12 o'clock. Excuse me. I see that it says 12 o'clock. And then I notice it's hot in the house. I see water under the fridge. And then I notice that the microwave is actually blinking 12 o'clock. Now, of course, the safe assumption would be that the power went out. And because the power goes out, the time reset, and now it's blinking 12 o'clock. So here's the question. Is it 12 o'clock? Well, my answer would have to be, I don't know. Because as they say, even a broken clock is right twice a day. But here's the point, is that if I believe it is 12 o'clock and my justification for believing that it's 12 o'clock is by pointing to the microwave, then I now have what's called an undercutting defeater to my belief that it's 12 o'clock. Given that the power went out, the microwave is no longer a rational mechanism or reliable mechanism that I can use to obtain truth. So that being said, that would be an undercutting defeater that takes away justification when using the microwave as something to warrant your belief that it's 12 o'clock. Okay. Now, with that said, there's no God. Everything that we are and that we have, it came to us on the basis of natural selection. Now, natural selection, if I can personify
personify it for a second, it doesn't necessarily care whether or not your beliefs are true. It just aims for survival value and not truth value. In other words, whatever your beliefs are, the aim or goal, and again, I'm personifying here, for natural selection is to select behaviors that are going to aid one in survival. So here's an example. Suppose I see a car coming towards me, and I form the belief a car's coming towards me. Then I form the belief that if this car hits me, I'm going to die. So then I form the belief that in order to save my life, I need to jump out of the way and I'll live. So I jump out of the way and I survive. Natural selection looks at that and says, check, those beliefs are good. Let's pass that on to the next generation. Because just like our hands and nails and teeth, our beliefs, if they cause anything, would be acquired and given to us the same way we got everything else that we have, namely through a natural selection, which aims for survival and not truth. Now, take the same scenario, but let's put a different set of beliefs to it. A car's coming towards me, but suppose I form the belief, or I have the belief that I'm Superman, and that even if the car hits me, it won't kill me, but I also form the belief that I want to protect my identity as Clark Kent and not let people know that I'm Superman. So then I formed the belief that in order to do this, the best thing to do is to jump out of the way of the car. So I jump out of the way of the car. I live, I survive, and once again, natural selection doesn't care whether or not my beliefs are true. It just cares that my beliefs work, and it says, check, let's pass those bad boys on. So the point there being is that if there's no God, and the only way we can explain getting here is through natural selection, then we cannot say that our cognitive faculties or our brain is a mechanism that was designed to reliably aim for truth, but is instead, at best, the only thing we can say is that it is given to us, our brain and our beliefs, all of our cognitive faculties are aimed at survival value, not truth value. So your beliefs don't have to be true for them to aid in survival. They just have to work. Now, if that's the case, much like there is an undercutting defeater for any justification that a person gives for believing the time on the basis of the microwave, your brain would be the same thing in that sense, that any belief that your brain produces in you now has an undercutting defeater, much like the microwave, the power went out, if you will. And any belief your brain produces cannot be trusted as that was given to you by a mechanism that is reliable for obtaining truth. So if your brain even gives you the belief that there is no God, then that belief in itself is a belief that cannot be trusted or relied upon, that was given to you by a mechanism designed to obtain truth. So that's one part of it. And of course, you add free will in there, and then it kind of has the same dilemma. So basically, any belief your brain produces has no justification, because that justification is taken away by that undercutting defeater. So if atheism is true, you literally would not have a justification for believing atheism is true. And by atheism, let me say this to be fair, by that I mean the belief there's no God. I know some people define that differently. If you do, that's fine. But for the sake that I'm using it, just for the sake of conversation, any justification you have for that would be taken away by the undercutting defeater. And at best, atheism would be irrational. At worst, it would be irrational.
What is your definition of rationality?
Very good. Yeah. So it would basically, there's a few definitions, but basically properly applying the laws of logic, properly doing your due diligence when it comes to looking at something. And there's a lot more to be said there. But even if let me to save time, I can say this: even if we don't, quote, have a good definition of rationality, we know what something would look like to be non-rational or irrational. So if I know that the power went out of the microwave, it would be irrational of me to use that as a justification to tell you what time it is. And the same thing would apply, I would say, again, to the brain if there's no God and it's just a mechanism that was brought about through natural selection as a means for survival value and not truth value.
See, I would agree with that if we knew what was irrational. But the problem is a lot of people don't know what's irrational. And your analogy, you are assuming that the person knows that the power went out. But that in itself is an assumption, right? We don't know that the power went out. That's just the first thing that occurred to the person based on the evidence that they have. Sure.
In the illustration, yeah. But given atheism or the belief there's no God, then we know the power went out in the sense that there was no power there to begin with. And let's just use power to talk about God. If there's no God, we know how the brain came about, natural selection. And then the argument follows.
But wouldn't that apply to a person who holds a belief in God as well? If regardless of what belief they have, that the same thing would be true if naturalism is correct and there is no God.
Yes, yeah. So yeah, right. So this is not an argument per se to show therefore God exists or Christianity is true. It's an argument to say if there is no God, we're just looking at that. If there is no God, these are the implications that would follow. So yes, any belief. So here's even ironically, if there is no God, then you would have to say that whatever rationality that you claim to have behind your beliefs is no more rational than the religious nut, crazy person yelling on the street corner with the sign saying the end is near. Both of you guys came to beliefs on the basis of the same type of mechanism, so you cannot call yourself more rational. And I'm not saying you personally, I'm just saying, to anyone it would apply.
Could I fall upon conclusions, the same conclusions as you, regardless of if I came to them by rational means?
Yes, of course. Yeah. So good question. So note here that the argument is not against whether or not the conclusion is true. It's against whether or not the conclusion was come to on the basis of some type of rational mechanism. Given the power now, we're just saying that there was no rational mechanism. You can't even get there to begin with. So, for example, so I've often said that if atheism is true, then your brain is nothing more than a glorified magic 8-ball. I can grab a magic 8-ball and ask it, will it rain? And I give it a good shake and it could say no. And that could be true. But we all know that the magic 8-ball is not, some type of a device that's going to tell us the weather. Right. And it's not reliable. It's not a mechanism designed to obtain truth. It's a mechanism designed for entertainment. So if there's no God, there's no difference between your brain and a magic 8-ball. And then, kind of being tongue-in-cheek here, I say, well, there is at least one difference, and that would be that if there's no God, if you turn the magic 8-ball upside down, we at least know that it was designed because it says made in China, whereas the brain would still not be designed by anything. So, tough crowd.
So no, it was funny. I'm still trying to figure out the analogy because you made the comparison between the brain and a magic 8-ball, which you defined as being for entertainment. Now, the brain, it wouldn't be for entertainment, even if there was no God. If atheism is true, as you're defining atheism, and there is no God, there could still be differences between the way that the brain works and reaches some sort of conclusion or makes a value judgment or truth assessment. The 8-ball isn't using any faculty. It's almost random. It's set up in a certain way to where it's going to come up with one of the 6 possibilities or however many. I don't know how many possibilities there are in a magic 8-ball, but there's only so many possibilities. And depending on how the water aligns, it's going to come up with one of them. But it's not using any mechanism to reach its conclusion. Whereas a human brain, even if there was no God, is still using a mechanism to determine what it believes and what it doesn't believe, right?
Yeah. So, and I wasn't saying that if there's no God, the brain was designed, for entertainment.
I didn't think you were saying that. I just, for clarity.
Yeah, fair enough. So it would so the brain would just be a really complicated magic 8-ball. But the magic 8-ball still does use a mechanism, just not as complicated as neurons and synapses firing. But it would still be a physical mechanism. Neither of which were designed to obtain truth. Of course, if there's no God, then obviously the brain wasn't designed to obtain truth. It wasn't designed for anything. And that's why I say at best, it's just something that would aim for survival value, not truth value.
And is that problematic?
Absolutely.
Why?
Well, same reason using the magic 8-ball is problematic to determine whether or not it's going to rain.
Well, the implications of using a magic 8-ball, if you understand that it's not really formulating a value judgment, right? And it's really just for entertainment purposes are not significant. But the implications of our beliefs can be significant, both on ourselves and to those around us. And so I would say that it's a little bit more, it's not really similar in the sense that, we don't use, like, I'm an atheist, right? But, or I guess, I don't know if I would be an atheist by your description, but let's just hypothetically assume that I am one. I certainly wouldn't be using a magic 8-ball to determine whether I should go to the store today or not, because that's not giving me a value judgment. I'm going to use, my faculties and what I experience as rationalism to make that decision. I don't have enough food in the house today. There's a sale at Walmart. I'm going to go, so I'm still thinking and using my brain and making a judgment. I have a belief that Walmart probably has some food that's on sale for me. Therefore, I should go to Walmart. That belief may or may not be true, but it is informed by previous experiences. I'm not just I didn't produce the belief out of thin air. Most of
Yeah.
our beliefs are a reaction to things that we've learned or informed by some sort of experience that we've had in the past, whereas the Magic 8 Ball was not.
Yeah. So again, I would just say all you're doing is just complicating the brain as a quote Magic 8 Ball. So, for example, you would just be a Magic 8 Ball with value judgments, but even your very value judgments would still be coming to you arisen by the same type of a mechanistic process. And again, just if we're going to stick with the analogy, it's like shaking the Magic 8 Ball. Will it rain today? Yes. Shake it again. How should I feel about this? And it says sad. So all you've done is added value judgments to it. But even that very value judgment is still something that you're just going back to the microwave, which already has an undercut and defeater, or going back to the Magic 8 Ball, which we've already explained isn't a mechanism designed to obtain truth. So adding value judgment doesn't solve the problem; it just adds another step.
Well, but the value judgment is based on something, though. It's not based on something that the Magic 8 Ball has. It's based on experience. Right.
Well, but again, it's all based on something that is given to you through this mechanistic process that still goes back to natural selection, which again would, at best, your brain and your beliefs and all your cognitive faculties are going to be. In other words, let's so to kind of mix in free will, because I think it might help clarify, even though they can be two separate arguments. If let's say I was able to put some type of implant in your brain, and I can control not only what you did, but how you felt about what you did. And I can control your belief. So I can cause you to believe, let's say there is no God, and then I can cause you to go to Walmart. And then when you see, the color red, it reminds you of the fact that you don't believe in God. And then I make you feel a feeling of anger or whatever the case is. In other words, adding more dominoes to it doesn't solve the problem. It just adds another domino that would still be something that was causally determined to you, or that was given to you, that arose through a mechanism, again, not designed to obtain truth. It's irrational at best. I'm not seeing why it's problematic. I think I understand why it would be problematic coming from a theistic worldview, or it certainly wouldn't be preferable if you have a belief in a God, if you already have a pre-existing belief in a God. But if you don't, I don't know why it would be preferable. I mean, that may just be the case. Right. So, a few things. So I haven't mentioned belief in God, and that's, that has nothing to do with the argument, but and that's fine. I'm mentioning that because to say this is that, maybe I can put it this way. If you asked me why I believe something, and I told you I believed it because I shook a Magic 8 Ball and it told me yes or no, what would you think of that kind of process?
I would think that was irrational, but the reason I would think that is irrational is because the Magic 8 Ball has not given you a rational justification for its answer.
Right. And just like the brain would have the undercut and defeater,
but
same problem.
But the brain can give you a rational justification for your belief. If I have a belief that Walmart has food, that's based on experience, right? And the knowledge that Walmart sells food. It's a different thing than what the Magic 8 Ball has. The Magic 8 Ball doesn't have any of that. It's just spinning in fluid to come up with an answer.
So here's where it would become circular, is because you're essentially going to have to say, I believe that I believe I can trust what my brain tells me because my brain told me I can believe what it tells me. So that would be circular, because it could very well be the case that whatever you believe, again, if let's say I'm causing you to believe these things, I can cause you to believe something and then cause you to believe that what you believe is based on experience or rationality. And you're stuck in this dialectical loop where whatever belief that you're going to posit is going to go back to, based on the reading of the microwave, going back to that first illustration. In other words, if I look at the microwave, it's blinking 12 o'clock. And I say, I believe it's 12 o'clock because that's what the microwave says. And you say, well, Eric, the power went out. You can't trust it. And I say, well, let me show you that I can trust it. And I run to my bedroom and look at my alarm clock and say, look, see, my alarm clock says 12 o'clock too. But of course, if my alarm clock is plugged into the wall, then it too would be affected by the power going out. And so it just goes back to the same problem, which is essentially what I would say that you're doing here.
Yeah, I would say that the only pushback I would give, because I do want to move on to other points on this, is to say that I think you may be conflating belief and knowledge here, because you talked about relying on your beliefs. And I don't think that all of my beliefs are true. I do think that my beliefs, that there's a rational justification for most of my beliefs. And then when I discover that there isn't, I usually drop the beliefs. But in the case of like going shopping for food, the fact that I had an experience in the past, or many experiences in the past, that going to Walmart resulted in food being produced, to me, that's what would give me the justification for having that belief. It doesn't necessarily mean it's true. It doesn't mean that I should solely rely on it, because Walmart could run out of food. It's possible, right? But I have a good starting point based on my experiences, and my experiences are all that I have. And I don't know what more I could have in addition to my experiences to inform my beliefs.
Yeah, and I guess the last thing I'd say, I don't mind moving on, is that I can put it this way: any belief your brain produces, including the belief that you've had past experience of X, Y, and Z, it still goes back to the microwave problem. So no matter what the belief is, you're going to be stuck in this kind of loop of circular or self-defeating to some extent. And no matter what belief you're going to put forward, in other words, there's no belief you can have that is not going to come to you. That's not going to come to you without your brain. So anything that's going to be passing through the brain is like being passed through that microwave with the blinking 12 o'clock.
Yeah, so I understand what you're saying and where you're coming from. The only issue that I have is that a magic 8-ball does not have the ability to adapt to its environment. The brain does have the ability to do that. So the same problems I see, the same problems still arise with what you're saying. I don't know any idea that you come up with or analogy that you use at some point breaks down, and I understand that. I see our brains as something that adapts to the environment. There's influences and experience. As a hard determinist, I just believe that everything that makes my morals me. I don't actually choose my morals or anything like that. Whatever influences and experiences have been presented to me, and how my brain initiates everything, that's exactly where my morals come from. It's just a brain reaction from influences and experiences. So I understand where you're coming from, jumping into the dualist worldview, but being in a determinist worldview, I don't have a way to answer your question, but I also at the same time don't see it as a problem.
Yeah. So to move on and segue,
Sure.
maybe to talk about consciousness of the soul.
Can I ask you a question before you move on?
Sure.
Just to get some more background. Would you say that this is a subject that you tend to spend the most time on when you're debating atheists or trying to make a persuasive argument to atheists? Do you think it comes down to, is it a determinism argument, a soul? What do you think the main topics that you spend time debating atheists? What would you say that they are on?
Are you asking what particular argument, or I guess?
Yeah. Do you have a go-to argument, or I guess what I'm asking is, do you find yourself maybe debating the same type of topic points over and over again when trying to convince atheists? Is there like one or two things that you think is the go-to argument, or does it range depending on who you're talking to?
So if it's a conversation that just kind of happens, kind of like what we're doing here, then I do like to use the argument I just used, and then go to where I'm going to next. So soul and consciousness and free will deals with that as well. What's the persuasion? And the persuasion, if anything, at least with these arguments, especially the one I just gave, is to show that if there's no God, you're going to be giving up these things. And it's what we would call in philosophy an intellectual price tag. And if you're willing to bite the bullet and pay the intellectual price tag, it's fine, but there's other implications to it. Like you can't say that. And again, I'm not saying, can you guys hear me?
Yeah.
Loud and clear.
Hold on. My phone's ringing. I forgot to put my phone on airplane mode. Sorry.
And it would be fair for me to ask, I'll ask it when he comes back, but I already asked him about when he debates other theists, what his goal and motivation for doing that is. And I would be curious to know what he gets out of debating atheists as well. Because I think he said he even has a preference for that. So I don't know if you heard any of that, Eric, but I can repeat it.
Yeah, a little bit, but just to finish, so the persuasion about giving up those things, again, you wouldn't be able to say that you came to your beliefs on the basis of rationality. You're going to have to say that any claim to rationality, like, for example, Justin said that I didn't choose my beliefs, but he's also a hard determinist. Well, it could be the case that he actually did choose his beliefs, but if hard determinism is true, he was determined to believe he didn't choose his beliefs. Even if he does choose his beliefs, he's determined to believe that he doesn't, even though he technically does, but his beliefs are determined to be the case that it's going to go contrary to what actually is the case and is true. So that's another, kind of one of those issues. And your question was, or could you repeat the question?
Well, if determinism is true, then I wouldn't be able to choose. So
yeah, I was going to say that he may not have the way that you're using the word having the ability to choose may or may not be compatible with determinism, depending on how you define the ability to choose. I think the way that Justin is using determinism would be to suggest that we have no ability to choose.
Sure. And I'm saying, and you're right. Yeah, I probably spoke too loosely or should have been more specific. Let's say he has the ability to choose, and determinism is true with respect to his beliefs. So he would actually have the ability to choose, but given this type of determinism that I'm using for the situation, it's just that his beliefs are caused to determine that he believes something that he actually doesn't do. So whatever he actually does, he's going to be determined to believe the opposite of what he does. So he believes he doesn't choose when in fact he does, but because of this determinism regarding his beliefs, what he believes is going to be false. And then he's even going to be determined to believe that what he believes is true, and then determined to believe that what he believes about his beliefs is rationally justified.
I'm not sure if that makes sense. If you're saying, well, I don't know. Justin, I can let you speak to this. The way that my brain is interpreting this is that if determinism is true, then he has no
What I think Eric just said was that not if determinism is true, but if I believe that determinism is true and determinism may not be true, then
is that what you meant?
That's a different way of putting it. What I was saying is let's put it into a hypothetical. Let's say I determined his beliefs, but not his actions. So he would have free will. Just for the sake of argument, he'd have free will with respect to his beliefs. But given that I determined his beliefs, I determined that he believes he has no free will, even though he does. So his beliefs are going to go contrary to what actually is true.
So if just so you have an understanding, just in case you spoke to somebody that's a determinist that thinks a little bit differently than I do, just basically lay out, and I've gotten quite fluent with this over the last 2 months that I've been speaking to people about it, because my belief in determinism is a fairly recent thing. So I'm still honing in my skills, on determinism when I'm still looking for ways out, because honestly, I don't want to be in the position that I'm in. So if I was to describe how I believe determinism, it basically goes like this. I was born into an existence that I didn't choose, with a body, with taste buds, a brain, everything that entails within my body that I didn't choose, with parents that I didn't choose, in a geography and location that I didn't choose. And throughout that childhood, I had experiences and influences that I didn't choose. And all of these things come together to create this arena of faculties that make me believe or give me what's right, wrong, true, false, good, and bad. Also my morals and everything that it goes along with that. So if all of these, if this arena of faculties makes me who I am and what I believe and what I think is good and bad, all of these are external factors. So if I was to change my geography and location and take my current one out that's in my life and put, let's just say, in a extremist Muslim community, I would think it'd be moral to go blow myself up. And that would be something that would be outside of my control. So if everything that I believe is determined off of external factors that possibly can be demonstrated, when did I ever make a single choice in my entire life?
Well, I would say, and I'm just kind of being technical here, is that you would choose, you just wouldn't choose freely. But I do get what you're saying. Just to throw it out there.
I agree with a will, but I agree with a will that I was compelled to have.
Yeah, right. That you were called, you determined to have, right?
Yeah, I don't sit at a Burger King drive-through waiting for fermions and bosons to just start reacting inside of my head. I act as if I do have choice and I like this, but that's due to prior experiences and influences mixed with my taste buds that say, hey, you like this. So that's what I'm going to order up. Yeah.
So I don't deny any of that, but of course I believe in what's called libertarian free will. Just for the sake of time, it's the opposite of determinism, if you will. But no, so you're talking about influences. If hard determinism is true, there are no influences; there are just causes. So if I were to line up 100 dominoes and push the first one, I can explain how they fell because it was a physical process that was causally determined by me setting up the dominoes. However, the first domino didn't influence the second domino to fall. It just caused the second domino to fall. It's a sufficient cause, not an influence. If hard determinism is true,
I'm happy with that.
Well, here's what I'm getting at with that is that there are no influences. Influences only apply if and only if you have some type of free will. And on my position, I don't deny that much of what you said about being born into a family I didn't choose, etc. But those would be influences, and if free will exists, the type that I hold to, then my influences merely influence my decisions. They don't cause my decisions because I still have to choose whether or not I act or refrain from acting upon my influences.
So you believe that if you were to go back in time to a decision that you made last week, that you would have the ability to choose otherwise?
I do think I would have the ability, but I don't define free will as whether or not I could have or would have chosen otherwise, but rather whether or not I am the source of my will or actions.
Bryce,
well, then we may be in agreement then. I mean, if that's how you're defining, I do believe that I am the source of my actions, but that's separate from whether my actions were determined.
Well,
so we may be... I think we're partially in agreement because I do think that I'm in control of my actions. I just picked up a glass, right? So I'm in control. But the thing that influenced me or caused, and I think there's some equivocation or semantics going on because I'm using them the same way. But which word did you prefer? Cause, I think. The thing that caused me, the thing that caused me to pick it up may be something beyond my control. But I'm still... Yeah, right, exactly. But I'm still responsible for having picked it up. And if I drop it, I'm still accountable for having to clean it up, regardless of what.
That's where I disagree. And that's why I hate being a determinist, because anybody that's ever done any horrible thing, a serial killer or a child molester or a rapist, for me to be consistent within my worldview, they're not responsible for their actions. But what we do as a society, I believe, is we would have to say, hey, you've been dealt a hand of cards in life, and we're going to have to go ahead and lock you up because we, as a community, as a society, we value well-being, and you're taking away, others' well-being. So unfortunately, you were determined to do this, but we were determined to toss your ass in jail. Sorry.
Why did you say you disagreed with me? That's exactly what I think.
But
that's
I
the
don't
same position I'm holding.
What we disagree on is that I don't think that I am the source at all.
Mm-hmm. Are you defining source? Well, but you would say that you are accountable, wouldn't you?
Responsible, yes. Accountable, no.
Oh, we are different because I'm the opposite.
Can I jump in?
Yeah, please.
Well, I totally don't mind letting the two atheists.
No, I'm curious about what he was saying.
I'm loving it. By the way, this is great.
When we have disagreements with each other, it can be as entertaining, if not more entertaining, than the disagreements we have with the guests or somebody coming from a different worldview. So, but go ahead.
Yeah, sure. Now, so a few things here. So I would say that Bryce, what you're talking about isn't responsibility. What you're simply saying, as I understand it, is simply that the causal chain of events pass through you, but that doesn't mean that you're the source. You're just an intermediate secondary mover, not the primary first mover. So here's what I mean by this. Suppose you have a line of 9 cars put in neutral. And let's say the 5th car is blue, the other 8 are white. And then a 10th car, let's say it's red, comes 100 miles an hour and bumps into the first white car. This will cause a causal chain of events of each white car to hit, and then it will hit the blue car will hit the white one. Now, although the momentum and chain of events passed through all the white cars, and the blue car did in fact hit the 5th blue car hit the 6th white car, the first mover of this causal chain of events was that 10th car that was speeding and hit the other 9 in neutral. So when I talk about responsibility and being held accountable, I'm talking about you're the first mover of this causal chain of events, not that the motion or the movement or the causal determining chain passed through you. if hard determinism is true, and this is what I think Justin was getting at, is that sure, you, quote, chose to pick up, your glass, but it was caused by external factors beyond your control, and you couldn't have done otherwise. So sure, it passes through you, but you're not in that sense responsible. You're just, like a bullet that kills a person. The bullet penetrates the heart, but it was shot by the gun. But we don't blame the gun or the bullet. We blame the person, because we assume that the person was the first move in this chain of events. But if determinism is true, then much like the gun or bullet, you can't blame the person. You have to go back to whatever was prior to that and keep going to the very first physical event that ever happened, which means all your actions, beliefs, and choices were causally determined by the Big Bang itself.
So I think we are all agreeing here. I think we're describing the same thing in a couple of different ways, but I agreed with everything that you just said there. I wanted to make a joke when you were talking about the number of cars, the white cars and blue cars. I was about to say it was my understanding that there would be no math, but you went past it so fast I wasn't able to put that in there. But no, we are in agreement there. I think maybe the difference is I was distinguishing between responsibility and accountability. And so I would agree that you are not responsible for your actions. I don't know if that's what Justin was saying, but I think that's what you were just saying. That the first cause would be if determinism was true. However, we still hold the individual accountable to actions that are associated with them. And that's necessary in our society for all of the reasons that you just mentioned, Justin, that, we have a system of laws designed to protect people. And, you can't have, even if a murderer isn't responsible for the murders that he committed, we're still going to hold him accountable to it, because we have the responsibility of protecting everyone else. But anyway.
Yeah.
It sounds like we're in agreement that if determinism is true, that would be the implication of determinism.
Well, yeah. So, I mean, I still wouldn't use accountable, but I'm fine with that just for the sake of time. I get what you guys are saying. But to kind of
in a legal sense, I was using it in a legal sense. We hold people accountable to their actions, whether or not it was caused by their upbringing or whatever the case may be.
Yeah.
Sure. Yeah. So setting that aside, but even then, the people that like Justin said, you were determined to do this and we were determined to throw you in jail. But the twist of irony, if you will, or the interesting or even sad thing is that if determinism is true, then we only believe these things were wrong because we were determined to believe these things were wrong. But what if what the other person believes is actually right, and they were determined with the right beliefs, and we were determined with the wrong beliefs? We're just the ones that have power and control. So again, it kind of goes back to, if determinism is true, and there is no God, and you have this 8-ball thing that we're talking about even in the beginning, then you can't say what you believe is true. All you can say is you were determined to believe what you do, and you were determined to believe that what you believe is true. And it's just determinism fighting against determinism. And we could very well be the ones that are wrong and immoral, yet throwing the people who are right in jail. So there's no justification to that.
I agree with everything you said, except the last few words. There's no justification for that. I think there is. But I agreed with everything else. I agree with everything else. We could be wrong. And I admit right from the start that I could be wrong about everything. Until someone shows me an objective way to determine what is true, then I have to go with what I experience.
But see, even then you're assuming you have some type of free will in the case, because what you're going to be going with is the cause of determination and the line of dominoes that are falling. And then you're going to also be further determined to believe that what you believe was on the basis of your experience and justification. But of course, it wasn't if determinism is true. I couldn't be assuming that free will is a thing if I'm also assuming that determinism is a thing. I don't think that I could assume that and still believe in determinism at the same time. In other words, you would have to implicitly assume it, whether you do outright or not. It's kind of like if someone says there is no truth, you ask them, is that true? Because it's self-defeating, because by saying there is no truth, you assume that what you say is true. So it's implicit in the statement itself. Even debating on whether or not determinism is true, in some sense, has to assume that the person you're debating and trying to change their mind, not saying we're necessarily doing that here, but you would have to assume that the person you're debating and trying to change their mind, in some sense, has the freedom to listen and believe you and freely change their mind to begin with. So even the very notion of arguing on free will... I think
you're smuggling in the word free there. I don't think the word free is necessary. I think you have to assume that the person is capable of being convinced but that's different from assuming that they are freely choosing to believe something different than what I don't think beliefs are choices. I think beliefs are a matter of being convinced by information that you receive. That could all be determined. I don't know if it is or not.
Well, again, so here's why I say all this. The language where you imply some type of a free will assumes it, because like I don't influence a computer program. I program it. I would call it determine what it does. I don't influence a Coke machine to give me a Coke. I put in $1 and push a button, and it's not an influence, it's a cause. Now you could say, well, they're not conscious. Add consciousness to it, doesn't make a difference. Now it just makes it a more complicated mechanism. So, and that's something we didn't even get to talk about. Another thing is I would argue if there's no God, there'd be no consciousness. So if you're conscious, I'd say then the belief there is no God would have to be false, which by default would have to mean that the belief that there is a God would have to be true.
I think I see the difference here because of the way that you're using the word influence differently than cause, and I think I'm using them synonymously. So the fact that you're differentiating between those two terms, I can understand how you are arriving. If you assume that things can be influenced, you are necessarily assuming free will. I think that's the argument that you're trying to make. Is that correct?
Sure. Yeah, I go with that.
Okay. Yeah. And I think that the way that I'm using the word influence, I'm using it synonymously with cause. So the influence being the cause. Now, and I don't have to do that, but that's just, I don't see a distinction there. It's probably because I'm a determinist that I see them as being the same thing. I don't believe in influence as some sort of separate, distinct thing from other causes. So that may be the
determined
difference.
To believe that. Yeah, because that's what I thought you were making a joke there, but you weren't.
No,
I believe that because I'm a determinist, determined to believe that. But
No.
yeah, I mean, but we can go wherever you guys want from here.
I'm curious. This is the question I wanted to ask when you had some difficulty there. But I asked the question of you earlier about your goals or the motivation when you have debates with other theists, people coming from different Christian perspectives. What do you think your motivation is when debating atheists? What are you hoping to get out of that, or what do you get out of that?
Yeah, thank you for asking the question. Because one thing I like to do, even with this, and we can, if you guys would allow, do it either at the end of this or at the end of the after party or something. But one of my motivations is first and foremost because I genuinely care about people and about the other person, which is why when I do these discussions, I like to close by asking the person if I can pray with them, even if it's off air and stuff like that. But first and foremost, I would say truth matters. And of course, I believe that Christianity is true, and I believe there's evidence for that. I believe that God exists. I believe there's an afterlife. And if what I believe is true, then I don't see how any Christian could sensibly be a follower of Christ and yet not want to, and if you would allow me to say it in the way I would say it as a Christian without offending you guys, then I would think any and every Christian would want to help people see the truth. And of course, I'm assuming Christianity is true. So it would be like if someone has, if there was a car coming and, I saw it coming towards you and I'm not saying this is fire insurance, but, of course I would try to tell you that, there's a car coming, anything short of pushing you out of the way. But since I can't force a belief on you, nor would I try to, and I don't even think you can force a belief on people. Nevertheless, if what I believe is true, you're made in God's image. And as long as you're breathing, you have the opportunity to accept them. And the reason I say it's not just fire insurance is because if there is a God that is all loving, then he loves you, whether you believe in him or not. And to have a relationship with him is one of the most human flourishing things you can do. And there's a lot more implications to that. So my motivation is first and foremost, I care about people. I love people. I give people the benefit of the doubt. This is why I don't often try to psychoanalyze someone, and I don't like it when either side does it. I don't, if I hear an atheist say, oh, and you guys haven't said that, but I've heard atheists say, oh, well, all Christians are just brainwashed or stupid or delusional, or you just believe that because you're afraid of this. You're psychoanalyzing someone. You don't know why they believe what they do.
Jump all over atheists when they do that.
Yeah, no,
they say that Christianity or theism is a mental illness. Show me your credentials. Like, I want to see what PhD you have to be able to diagnose somebody.
Yeah, and the same with Christians when they try to do that. Saying that oh well, you're just an atheist because you just want to do this or you just, whatever. Yeah,
I've been told that atheism is inherently a product of brain rot, of physical, actual brain rot.
I agree with both of you that people shouldn't do that, and it's not helpful or persuasive to the other person when you are doing that. And if someone is doing that, their goal probably isn't to persuade. I might object with your usage of the term psychoanalyze, because I psychoanalyze people all the time. I have a degree in psychology, and so it just kind of comes naturally to me. But there are ways of psychoanalyzing people. I think almost everyone psychoanalyzes the people they talk to, even on a subconscious level, but you're not necessarily doing it audibly or in a way that would offend the other person. I have certain beliefs about you. And one of those beliefs, by the way, and I'm glad that you answered the way that you did, because, I asked you why you debate atheists, and you gave a very honest answer. Essentially, it's a form of evangelism. You're trying to persuade us that we need to be following the thing that you believe is true that's going to lead to our salvation. And I so wish that other Christians who I debate would answer in that way, assuming it's true, but there's a lot of people who wouldn't answer it that way, and I know a lot of Christians who I have debates with all the time who, their goal, first of all, they've already started from a position that kind of like what Justin was saying. They have this belief that we are atheists because we choose not to believe, and they may be coming from a Calvinist perspective where they think that we are determined to go to hell. There's a lot of different theistic positions out there and reasons why a Christian might have a debate. But I think that the empathetic one, ironically, in this case, is the Christian one, which is the one that you just gave, because you are trying to help save people. And I admire that. I don't agree with you, but at least you gave an honest answer. And it's frustrating to me when I ask Christians this question and they say, well, I'm really just doing it for entertainment, or I'm doing it as an example to the other Christians who might be watching, but not to try to convince you.
Wow, that's incredibly disheartening to hear that. If you don't mind me asking you the same question, what's your goal or aim or reason for debating or having these kind of conversations to both you guys with Christians or people of other faiths?
Yeah, for me, I used to be a Christian apologist for most of my life, actually. And so I wasn't an atheist until about 3 years ago. But once I became an atheist, and then this is coincidentally around the same time I started learning, critical thinking and argumentation and all of this sort of thing, I became interested in what other people believe, first of all, and why they believe it. Because when I was a Christian, I had assumptions about what other people believe that I found were incorrect as I went through life. Just encountering other people, life experiences. I was in the military for a while. You meet people from all walks of life and find out there's all kinds of other beliefs out there, and your assumptions are incorrect. And so knowing how many different belief systems there are and how many individual perspectives there are within those systems made me curious about why people come to the beliefs that they do. And so I started learning about that. But the best way to learn about that is actually talking to people about what they believe and why they believe it.
Kent, before Justin, you answer, if you don't mind me asking, and before I ask, I'm going to apologize to my Calvinist and precept brothers and sisters who may be listening. I asked because were you a precept? And I asked because it sounded like you said you were a Christian apologist, but then you said when you started learning critical thinking, then you became an atheist. And I don't mean this as an offense to presuppositionalists, but some of that flavor would take that type. Why did you consider yourself an apologist without having learned or done some kind of studying in critical thinking?
Well, I considered myself an apologist because my goal, I was coming from the position, I held a presupposition that a God existed, that it was the Christian God of the Bible, that the Bible was true. And so that's what my worldview was. And so any interpretation I had of the Bible or of reality was from that flavor. And my goal as a Christian, kind of the same as yours at the time, was just in evangelizing and trying to convince atheists that, hey, this thing makes sense. Maybe I can explain it to you in such a way that you haven't heard it before, to correct some of your misconceptions about Christianity. And so that's what I was doing. The goal was to make a persuasive argument for why the Bible is true, why it's to be believed, why your skepticism about it is unjustified, and why you should take a leap of faith. But that was before I learned anything about critical thinking or argumentation, or before I critically examined my own beliefs. I didn't start doing that until afterwards.
So are you saying that when you defended, as what you called yourself an apologist, you're saying you defended it and you weren't using critical thinking skills?
Correct. Because I was defending it from a place absent of skepticism, and skepticism is a critical component to critical thinking. My position on faith was that basically what Hebrews 11:1 says, faith is the assurance of things hoped for, the evidence of things unseen, and that it was necessary for us to take a leap of faith, and that faith would reassure us that what we are believing is correct. And so I didn't apply skepticism to any of those beliefs or even that teaching. That was something I accepted blindly because blessed is he who believes without seeing. That was my interpretation. So no, I was not applying critical thinking to my own beliefs. I didn't start doing that until after I became an atheist. And then I could look back on it and say, hey, that's not the reason I became an atheist, by the way. It wasn't because I learned critical thinking. That happened afterwards. The transition was before I started learning about all of that.
Gotcha. So even before you became an atheist, you didn't study critical thinking. But and I would even say the two verses you quoted would be antithetical to what you're saying. But that's an entirely, I don't want to take up more time there, but I appreciate you giving the answer there.
Yeah. And then Justin I think you were asking him as well.
Yeah, sure.
So basically the question is, in a nutshell, why I do what I do, why I come on here and have these conversations.
Yeah. Okay.
So kind of like Bryce, I wasn't an apologist, but I grew up in a religious household, went to a Catholic school for 7 years. I was told at the age of 7 that if I didn't turn my science homework in, that I would be hung by my tongue over fire and brimstone, scared to live in out of me. So I kind of backed away from that, went towards Christianity, joined a Methodist church, joined the youth group, joined the church band, became a youth group leader. And then everybody around me told me that I was filled with the Holy Spirit. So they said I should become a preacher. So I went to go to seminary. Before I left for seminary, before I really even jumped into that, I said, hold on, wait a second. I've heard a lot of sermons, but let me read the whole entire Bible, maybe get a step or two ahead of everybody else. So when I go in there, I'll have some type of, other than just the simple gospels and what's regularly said at the pulpit, read some of these other stories that are in the Bible. So once I did that, saw some stuff, the Old Testament completely made me do a 180. I couldn't justify morally why these things were happening. So I kind of went away from that. But I still have, after becoming an atheist, I still have an open mind. And I still try and be, a lot of atheists say they're open-minded. I would argue against some of them. That they're actually not open-minded, that they are only out to disprove God. I try and be an example of somebody who's not that. I try and be an example of somebody who, instead of saying, well, you got the wrong interpretation and you got the wrong interpretation, what I do is I want to adopt their interpretation and go into their worldview and then see if it is logically coherent once we're inside of that worldview. I think that's a better way of having these conversations. But really, the conversation, Eric, is not for me to convince you or you to convince me. It's for the 29 people that are sitting here watching this right now. If somebody might be on the fence, you might be able to strengthen their faith. I might be able to help them get out of religion. However it goes, we are giving both sides, and we're not stuck in some echo chamber just sitting there talking about each other. We actually can come on here, show each other that we can coexist together, disagree on very controversial subjects, and at the end of the day, shake hands and walk away from this learning something from the other person that you didn't know before.
Awesome, right on. Yeah, I appreciate you guys answering.
So we are.
Do you mind if I ask how old you are, Eric?
No, not at all. 33.
3 years old.
Okay.
But yeah, we're a couple minutes over. Eric, I don't know if you were able to hang out with in the after party with us. If you'd like to.
Yeah.
Sure. Okay.
Yeah, you might. Do you mind? If you say no, I don't mind. But I always like to ask if I could pray for you guys.
Sure. Bryce, are you okay with that?
Sure.
Awesome.
Go ahead,
yeah. Lord, I just thank you first and foremost for the day you've given us. I thank you for Bryce. I thank you for Justin. I thank you for their lives, for allowing me to be able to meet these great guys. I pray that you would just bless their lives, their family, Lord, what they're doing, and that bless them also and primarily first and foremost by revealing yourself to them, Lord. I'm thankful that they're open-minded, that they're seeking, and I pray that this conversation would bear fruit, Lord, however you see fit. And again, I just want to stress I thank you for who they are and them just allowing me to have the time to come and talk with them. In your name we pray. Amen. Thank you.
Thank you.
Do you find that most atheists would object to you praying for them or about them?
So I surprisingly, I've had most atheists say yes, and I've appreciated that. And I'm glad you asked because, I've known of atheists who, if, they're in the mall and they sneeze and you say, God bless you, they turn around and start yelling at you or something like that. And one thing I want atheists to understand, and that's why I said I'm glad you asked the question, is that, whenever I say something like that, or if I tell someone I'm praying for them, even if I'm telling atheists I'm praying for them, at the very least, someone who doesn't believe in God, at the very least would understand or should understand that the person saying that is saying it because if what they believe is true, then it's one of the kindest, signs of endearment that you can do. So, if you take it, which I think you guys did, take it as that at the very least, you can say, okay, well, I know he means that, he's coming from a good place doing that, not in any type of like dominance or anything like that. So I appreciate you guys.
I could see the way that you asked that question. You said, hey, can I pray for you guys? There's a lot of times, especially when you're on Facebook, having these, debates with your thumbs, in these Facebook groups, at the very end, when somebody gets cornered or somebody gets, a little pissed off, I'll get well, this conversation's over. I'll pray for you.
Yeah, that's a different connotation.
Yeah, that's not what you did. My response to that is okay, and I'll think for you. Just as a little jab back to him. But no, that was genuine. I appreciate genuineness. I had a debate over the effectiveness of prayer. I don't know why the debate was brought to me. It was brought to me by my opponent, and it was specified that we were actually going to talk about the effectiveness of a prayer, not the usefulness that a prayer can have on people's lives, but like the actual, like, did it work?
Sure.
And I don't think that can be proved. And in the debate, it can't be proved that the actual prayer, like correlation, is not equivalent to causation. So, but within that, I still see the usefulness in prayer. I still see the usefulness that you are a genuine person, Eric, and you really want me and Bryce to be saved and go to heaven with you. So in a genuine sense, I appreciate that. And I would hope that other atheists would appreciate that also. Not take it as a time to be like, hurry up with your stupid talking to yourself inside of your own head crap. Like, be genuine. If you're an atheist out there and somebody wants to pray for you, bow your head. Or, you don't have to bow your head, but at least just give them the opportunity to try and care for you in their own way.
Sure. That's and I appreciate that.
But we're about 10 minutes over. We'll take about a 20-minute break. And then I will send you, Eric, and Bryce will send you a link. It's going to be a different link than this to the next show, to the after party.